What's up YouTube, it's Ryan from AnnihilatorMTG here, and I'm back again with some more Modern. This week, we're going to be playing a deck that sort of complements the Reanimator archetype, and that would be 4-color Creativity. While perhaps a little less explosive than Reanimator, this deck feels just as strong, and depending on what you're looking to do, it's much more flexible, so let's break it down. For those of you who are unaware, this deck leverages Indomitable Creativity in tandem with Archon of Cruelty to win the game. You can substitute Archon with another big threat like Emrakul, but in my opinion, running multiple copies of Archon is the way to go. In order to make the creativity work, we use a combination of Dwarven Mine, Hard Evidence, and Prismari Command to generate low opportunity cost targets. It's important to note that outside of the aforementioned Archon, there is not a single creature in the deck. This means that every time Indomitable Creativity resolves, one or more copies of Archon is guaranteed to hit the board. Outside of the combo itself, which is almost entirely 2-color, we utilize some incredibly solid cards in both green and white respectively. Wrenn and Six and Teferi Time Raveler need no introduction. The former allows us to loop fetches all day long, essentially tutoring for Dwarven Mine at the drop of a hat, while the latter ensures that our combo goes off without a hitch. Then of course, as far as removal goes, Prismatic Ending is about as good as it gets. You'll also notice that we're running 2 copies of Nahiri Harbinger, but outside of a few matchups, I don't see this card being super relevant. This is one of those Magic the Gathering builds that completely disregards the color pie. If there's a card that you like and it fits within the mana curve, just put it in there. So long as you're utilizing and supporting the combo, chances are it'll work out just fine. So with that said, let's not waste any time here and head straight into the first match. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend, and this hand seems good enough. We'll start things off with a Scalding Tarn and see what they're playing. They get things rolling with a Memnite into a Glimmervoid. Then they cast a Prototype. This seems manageable. During their end step, we'll crack our fetch for a Triome, drawing another one. Think we'll just play the Blood Crypt untapped, then cast our Wrenn and Six. This allows us to downtick and hit their dude. It's not just about answering the board for the sake of it, but doing so as a means to mitigate their affinity count. Either way, they play a Citadel and pass straight through. There's another Mine. Before anything else, let's uptick our Wrenn and Six. Then we'll jam the fetch, cracking it for a Sacred Foundry. Here comes the Teferi. It resolves, so I guess we'll just uptick and be on our way. After much deliberation, they play a tap land, then hit a Thought Cast. If nothing else, Affinity's excellent at keeping their hand full. As are we. That's another land. We'll uptick once again, then bounce their Prototype, seeing, wouldn't you know it, another land. Let's get this show on the road by jamming a Dwarven Mine. That'll generate a token, and now we wait. On their main phase, they replay the Prototype. Then we see a Darksteel Citadel into a Frogmite. They cast a Thought Monitor as well. Aether Spellbomb could be an issue. During their end step, we'll cycle the Triome, hitting an Archon. We draw a copy of Teferi. Speaking of which, let's uptick. Then we'll cast the Prismatic Ending on their Spellbomb. Beautiful. Might as well get the Triome back. Then we'll play Dwarven Mine number 2, generating a token. And outside of that, I don't think we need to do anything. Up next, they leverage an incredibly inexpensive Thought Cast, only to play an Urza Saga, moving straight into combat. That'll mean the end of our Teferi. Just when we least expected it, we get hit with a pre- and post-combat Thought Cast sandwich. That gets them an Ornithopter. As is tradition, we'll cycle the Triome, drawing a Creativity, amazing. Then we see a copy of Fire and Ice. Let's take the opportunity to play a fetch, then uptick to get our Triome back. We could crack this fetch for more tokens, but seeing as one of the Archons is already in our hand, that wouldn't make sense. So we'll cast the Creativity for 5 total mana, launching 2 Archons onto the board, and that seems to be enough. Nice. Sideboarding in this matchup is going to be about as straightforward as it gets. Seeing as they're playing mostly artifacts, anything to help us with that is coming in for sure. That means we'll be cutting 2 copies of Remand and a singleton Teferi, and this allows us to make room for the 3 Wear Tears. Looks good to me. This hand is not fantastic. Let's try it again. Much better. We'll keep and ship a Teferi. They start things off with a Glimmervoid into a Relic of Progenitus. I'd love to hear from some Affinity players in the comment section. Is Relic a low opportunity cost inclusion, or are they focusing too much on Wrenn and Six? Either way, we draw a copy of Dwarven Mine. Seeing as there's no real threat, we can just play the Triome and send it back. On their main phase, they play a tap land, then cast Relic number 2. Okay. Archon is not what we were looking for. At this point, I think we're just going to jam the Steam Vents and take out one of their relics. It lowers their affinity count and eliminates a potential redraw. Up next, they play an Urza's Saga, then cast the Prototype. That enables a very affordable copy of Frogmite. We draw an Evidence. Let's play and crack the Scalding Tarn for a Sacred Foundry. Then we'll cast Teferi, down-ticking to answer their Frogmite. They tap in response. That draws us another land. And if this Teferi takes the heat, I'm actually super okay with that. Speaking of which, they uptick their Urza's Saga, then immediately activate it. Their Frogmite has returned. Magic Online, you're making me nervous with the second Archon. No matter, we'll just uptick our Teferi, then jam the Mine, immediately casting the Creativity. That gets us an Archon, and it looks like they've had enough. GG's opponent. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend, and this hand seems nice. Let's get things rolling with the Steam Vents. This will give us tons of flexibility. They play and crack a Verdant Catacombs for an Overgrown Tomb, only to cast a copy of Young Wolf. Have to assume they're playing Yawgmoth. Either way, the spell resolves. We draw a fetch, let's play it, then we'll hold up the Remand. Before anything else, they swing in for 1. Then they play and crack a Misty Rainforest, grabbing a basic. Here comes a Wall of Roots. In response, we'll cash in our fetch for a Sacred Foundry, countering with a Remand, hitting an island, then a Creativity. Let's play the fetch, then crack it for a Stomping Ground. Then we'll cast Teferi, down-ticking to bounce their dude. That would be Creativity number 2. On their main phase, they jam a Filter Land, then cast the Wall of Roots, leveraging it immediately to also play the Wolf, make that 2, drawing a Fire and Ice. Let's play the island, then uptick Teferi. Coincidentally, Fire is a wonderful card in this situation. As expected, they attack immediately. Before damage, we'll cast the Fire. Both of their creatures will come back with counters on them. The Man of the Hour has arrived as they cast a Yawgmoth. Not much we can do about that, so we'll jam Lightning Bolt in response to take out their Wall of Roots. After resolution, they play another land and cast a Noble. Geez, and we draw the world's most convenient Dwarven Mine? Let's play it. That'll generate a token. Then we'll cast Creativity number 1, which resolves immediately. They sack the Noble, discard a land, and we draw 1. At this point, all we can really do is uptick and hope they don't do anything too crazy on the following turn. Dryad is hardly intimidating, although they do cast a Strangleroot Geist. Sacrificing it immediately and removing a counter from the Wolf. That goes 2, which restores their Geist to its previous state. After doing this, they've lost 2 life and drew 2 cards. Oh wow, and they tap out for a Chord of Calling? That's really unfortunate for them. We'll counter with a Spell Pierce. Change of plans, as they sacrifice their Geist to target our dude. Then they cast a Noble, binning the Dryad to restore the Geist, which they sacrifice an additional time to weaken our creature. Then they go after Teferi. It dies, finally sacrificing basically everything to destroy the Archon. We draw some evidence, let's cast it. Then we'll play and crack the fetch for a Dwarven Mine, getting a token. And before we even cast the spell, they just concede. Okay. The sad thing about this matchup is that we can almost assuredly ignore what they're doing, with the main exception being the Namesake card. So despite their usefulness, we'll cut the Spell Pierces. That way we can bring in 2 Veil of Summers. Yeah, that should be fine. This hand has pretty much everything we'd ever need. They start things off with a tap land and nothing else. We draw an Arid Mesa. Let's play and crack the Scalding Tarn for a Steam Vents. Then we'll cast the Evidence and send it back. Up next, they play a fast land, then cast a Wall of Roots. Drawing another land. Let's play it and cash it in for a green source. Then we'll cast our Wrenn and Six, upticking to get our fetch back. Keeping things competitive as they play and crack a Misty Rainforest for a Dryad. Then they Windmill Slam a Grist. Interestingly enough, they choose to get rid of their land. That way they can take out our Planeswalker. Oh boy, but we draw a replacement. That's gotta hurt. And it does, down ticking to hit their Grist. Then we'll play the Triome and send it back. I feel like we're at a really good pace this game. They play and crack a Verdant Catacombs for a basic. Never late to the party as they cast a Yawgmoth. Getting Deja Vu here, that's a Dwarven Mine. Let's play it. That gets us a token. And you know what? I think we're just gonna cast the Teferi. Before resolution, they cast an incredibly good Veil of Summer. This complicates things. I suppose we'll just uptick with both of our walkers. On their next turn, they play another fetch, then cast a Grist. Here comes a Noble. Then they uptick, getting a token, which they use to answer one of our tokens. Looks like they're gonna hit Teferi. We draw a copy of Fire and Ice. Before anything else, let's uptick Teferi, then downtick with Wrenn to remove the Noble. In response, they sacrifice it and target our token. Now we can play and crack a Scalding Tarn for another Dwarven Mine. After generating a token, we'll cast the Creativity for a total of 5 mana, and it looks like that'll do it. GG's opponent. Alrighty, looks like we found our opponent. Best of luck to you, my friend, and this hand seems good enough. Let's get things started with a Triome and see what they're playing. Before anything else, they cycle a Street Wraith, potentially indicating Living End. Then they play a Bloodstained Mire and send it back. We draw some evidence. Let's play the Scalding Tarn, cracking it for a Steam Vents. Then we'll cast the Wrenn and Six. In response, they crack their fetch for a Blood Crypt. The spell resolves. Let's uptick to get our fetch back, and that'll be it. Up next, they jam an untapped Steam Vents and cast a Kroxa. If it wasn't obvious before, it is now. This appears to be Shadow. We'll discard the evidence. That's another land. Let's play and crack it for a Triome. That way we can get it back with a Wrenn and Six. After much deliberation, they play a Scalding Tarn and cash it in for a Blood Crypt. Here comes Shadow number 1. This is a bit risky, but let's hit it with a Lightning Bolt. In response, they flash out a copy of Dress Down. Can't have that, so we'll counter it with a Spell Pierce. The Shadow dies as we draw another land. We'll play and crack it for a Dwarven Mine. That'll get us a token. Then we'll uptick and cast Creativity number 1. The spell resolves, and it looks like they've seen enough. Nice. Sideboarding in this matchup has me worried almost exclusively about tempo, so with that in mind, let's cut the 2 copies of Nahiri and the full playset of Teferis. That way we can bring in 3 Veils, a Singleton Blossoming Calm, and 2 copies of Flusterstorm. Yep, that should be fine. This hand looks pretty good. We can definitely make this work. They get things started with a Steam Vents and nothing else. We draw Veil number 2. Excellent. Let's play one of our fetches and see what they do. In a strange turn of events, they play another Steam Vents, but this time it'll come in tapped. Weirdness aside, let's crack our fetch for a Triome. Drawing a Wrenn and Six. Ooh, this is tempting. Let's play another fetch and crack it for a Stomping Ground. Then we'll cast it. The spell resolves. Excellent. So now we can uptick and get this value engine online. Up next, they cast an Expressive Iteration. Then they play and crack a Scalding Tarn for a Watery Grave. And now we see a very underwhelming Thoughtseize. No matter what they take, they aren't going to be happy about what we have. There goes the Spell Pierce. We draw Blood Crypt. Let's uptick once again. Then we'll play a fetch and send it back. Speaking of Blood Crypts, they play one. Then they cast a copy of Nihil Spellbomb. I guess we'll give them some motivation by cracking the fetch on their end step, grabbing another Triome. Then we draw Remand. Let's see if we can bait out the activation. Apparently not. Well, this is weird. The best thing to do at this point is to just play another land and maintain the holding pattern. They decide to cash in the Spellbomb during our end step. Okay, then we'll discard a land, specifically after the Spellbomb is already gone, maintaining parity as they play a Scalding Tarn and crack it for a Blood Crypt. That would be a Gurmag Angler. Remand is going to be fantastic in this situation. In response, they attempt a Spell Pierce. Let's crack our fetch for a Dwarven Mine, netting us a token. Then we'll pay the 2 mana. That's odd. I expected them to use another Spell Pierce. Drawing a Lightning Bolt. Let's continue the time-honored tradition of getting our lands back. Then we'll jam it. During our end step, they Lightning Bolt our token. Then on their main phase, they play a Bloodstained Mire, activating it and searching for a basic. Here comes a Thoughtseize, despite the fact that they are fully aware of the 2 Veils. Let's cast one of them. That gets us a Plains. We see an Expressive Iteration on their side. Then they cast a non-delirium copy of Unholy Heat, followed by a Gurmag Angler. With things the way they are, I think it's time for us to get aggressive. So let's cast the Lightning Bolt, then cycle the Veil of Summer, hitting a Creativity. Then we draw Steam Vents. Let's play the Wooded Foothills, then sacrifice it for another Dwarven Mine. That gets us a token. Now we can cast the Creativity. The spell resolves, and they scoop it up. GG's opponent. And there you have it. Once again, this deck has proven itself to be more than capable of winning matches. The last time that I played this build, I ran it in a 3-color configuration and came to the conclusion that 4-color or even 2-color is probably a lot better. Granted, for differing reasons. Truth be told, that opinion hasn't changed. I don't expect 2-color to be strictly better than 4-color, but I think that people greatly underestimate what it can do. If you want to see me run that deck in the future, please let me know. So I have a lot of personal stuff going on throughout March, and there's a slight chance that I take a week off during that time, but knowing myself, I'll probably try to power through it. With that said, if I do miss a video, don't worry, everything's all good, and I truly appreciate you. If you like my content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. This stuff truly does help, so thank you, and as always, stay safe out there and have a good one.